Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This next current panel that we have on the schedule for the summit is the Black Supply Chain, Hemp, and Policy panel. I'm Yema Brewer with the Black Sustainability Summit Planning Committee, and we have with us our distinguished panelists here that we're going to hear from. We'll be having a discussion on the fast-growing hemp industry, value-added products, supply chain policy, and the opportunities for Black hemp business owners and the entrepreneurs that are wanting to get started or are fairly new to this industry. And they're going to be very honest and open about their experiences being one of the few Blacks in hemp from different aspects of based on what they do, as well as just talking about other industries, related to agriculture and tied to sustainability, being Black business owners, and the importance of us having more of a presence in supply chain policy issues, current trends, and all of that. So we welcome T.Kay Hamlin, Scheril Murray Powell, William Reynolds, and Jehuti Willis. We'll go in that order. We'll hear from them individually in that order, and we will do questions at the end after Jehuti speaks. So please utilize the chat feature within the Whova app. I'll be checking for questions there, and then also we'll have enough time. I'll give you the opportunity to unmute yourselves and ask your questions directly to them. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over for us to get started with Ms. T.Kay Hamlin.
Thank you for that introduction. First of all, welcome everyone to the Black Sustainability Summit. My name is T.Kay Hamlin. I am here representing Hemp Research Group, which is one of the businesses that I have started in order to assist people in the industry to address the barriers to entry, to address the barriers to being profitable, and to address the overall sustainability of people in this industry. So I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share and probably flip through it real quickly so that we can get to the really juicy part, which is the Q&A. Everybody's got a lot of questions about what's happening in hemp. So here we go. Give me one moment, because I will share my screen with you all. Share. All right. So cannabis is the sustainability issue of our time. And I was delighted today to speak to sustainability professionals because sustainability and hemp are intrinsically tied, but they're not very often brought up in the same circles. So hopefully before we're done today, everyone here will have some sense of why the big interest in hemp and cannabis largely as it relates to sustainability, some specific sustainability challenges that I personally have run into in the cannabis supply chain, and that also affect the people in the industry. And then lastly, some sustainable and cooperative approaches for suppliers. And next slide. Okay. So how did we get here? Across the top here, I won't read all of this to you, but I have a timeline that just talks a little bit about the last 50 years or so, because those 50 years and what's occurred really has impacted the supply chains. Underneath that, I have a grid that really describes all of the potential opportunities that hemp has because it is part of the agri-food sector. So far, it's been treated as something very, very different, but with the Farm Bill passage of in 2018, regulating and legalizing the production, cultivation, extraction, processing of hemp, then we're really into the agri-food sector. So everything in that sector can really be a can really be a profit center for hemp. Most people think about its medicinal and or uses for wellness, or what we call adult use or lifestyle use, but there are a range of things happening with hemp. And the legalization was really about creating room for all of the industrial uses. So what is a supply chain? I didn't want to go too far without just talking about that for a little bit. What you see on this slide is actually an example of what's happening in the supply chain in Virginia and activities that we've gotten involved in, or that I've been able to be a part of through Hemp Research Group, which is obviously production startup and research, but then there's also an order of harvest research and marketing and sales that have also played a significant role in my work over the last 2 years. So what is a supply chain? It's the sequence of processes involved in the production and distribution of a commodity. Cannabis is a sustainability issue. Hemp is a sustainability issue because it's been discovered and it isn't new. So there's a real risk that the sequence of processes involved will be disrupted for brown people, for brown and Black people. To the extent that there has been hemp and cannabis supply chains, then what we're really doing is tapping into an industry and then converting it for commercial purposes. And I bring that up because I hear a lot of conversations in cannabis and they use the word inclusion. And I think that what's happening right now is people are being included who weren't actively sustaining this industry over the last 50 years. So on the next slide, I start with 7 things you can learn about sustainability from the people most affected by the war on drugs. And I come at this from the perspective of sustainability is something that also affects people, because what we're really doing is creating opportunities for wealth building, increased resilience in communities. And so what we're going to do just for the next 5 minutes is look at how hemp and cannabis overall have sustained, has been sustained in the US for the last 50 years. Some of the principles involved in sustaining that. The first principle is Black Lives Matter. In talking to people experienced in the industry, Black lives have in fact, Black and brown people have in fact sustained access to seeds, plants, et cetera, and knowledge, the know-how that's necessary to actually create an industry is present here, and it's present in a lot of Black and brown bodies. Another principle of sustainability, and that's a larger principle of sustainability, and I don't think that there are a lot of people that would disagree with that, but I think what's happening is hemp creates this big, huge space to talk about Black lives in reference to sustainability. Same thing with females. That's a little bit of a play on words there, because anyone who knows anything about this industry knows that the flower and what we consider to be recreational consumables are made from the female plant. Hemp is what they call a dioecious plant, which means that it could be male or female. And so females matter, but moreover, as a principle, women and their roles in the industry really matter. Hold on. Scale matters, boundaries matter, risk matters, energy matters, and trusted networks matter. And I think that everyone can kind of look at this list and see some of the principles of sustainability and how they might interact with the industry. So Black Lives Matter, I just kind of talked about that and why that's important. But at the end of the day, there are 5 critical functions of the supply chain: production, extraction, activism and advocacy, and cannabis entrepreneurship. And that is an acronym that I use if anyone wants to keep that in the top of their mind. What are the 5 things going on in the industry? That acronym spells peace: producers, extractors, activists, and cannabis entrepreneurs. Again, females matter. To the industry, women have largely had a role in storage, quality control, packaging, delivery, and cleanup. These are historical roles that women have played in this industry. And I make that sound technical, but from a cannabis perspective, think real estate is, the grow in grandma's basement. But these roles can continually be pursued by women as the entire industry expands into all of the industrial uses. So real estate, product analysts, marketers, logistics specialists, waste management, and obviously the farming itself. Scale matters. This slide depicts 2 things. One is a kind of artisanal size grow room. And for the last 50 years, this is kind of what's been going on. Now, if you look at the picture, on the right, you'll see what is a 90,000 square foot grow. And so with the level of investment that's going into hemp, scale matters. ROI, return on investment, is ultimately what people need to keep the doors open. And so managing risk, energy, and capital matter like they never did before. Boundaries matter. Boundaries matter, as a sustainability principle that you can look back over the last 50 years to understand. You realize that the networks for this plant have largely been local and really tight, because growing conditions and so many other factors affect availability, traceability, and regulation. And these are the things that are going to affect availability, traceability, and regulation of the product today. So many people ask me, well, if I want to get started, what do I need to do? The first thing that I would do is find out what's been happening in your area as it relates to hemp. A good resource for that are the participants of the industrial hemp programs. Back on that other slide, if you noticed, industrial hemp started in 2014 as research programs all across the country. So there are lots of universities and state agencies that have gotten involved, and they actually have information. Here, I have the information from Virginia, and who looked at insect pressure, who looked at indoor growing, who looked at medicinal compounds, planting dates, growing conditions, and seed research. So that's where I would start for someone who's really looking to find a place in this industry. I get a call a week from someone who says, I got a piece of land, can I grow hemp? Well, you can, but there are lots of other parts to the supply chain, and some of them may be easier for you to enter. Some of them may be more in line with other business ideas or opportunities that you have going.
About 2 minutes,
so
please.
I have 2 minutes. Last thing, trust matters in this industry. So connecting with people that are trusted sources of information is super important. Risk matters. I did a survey, and the responses are on the right there as to what are the risks for this industry. One is the speed of the rulemaking. That's happening really fast, and it's changing all the time. Field testing, I won't read all of that to you guys, but those are supply chain issues based on my interface with people in the industry. And energy matters. you're looking at two things that affect that are going to affect the supply chains that people don't think about when it comes to farming. This is a major control room in that 90,000 square foot grow, and this is a fully off-grid growing center. In other words, it's completely powered by solar on the left. And that pretty much accounts for about $30,000 in utility costs every month. So how can sustainability leaders address hemp and cannabis supply chains? Again, be strategic in your action planning, and also join me tonight for our networking session, where we're going to carry on the conversation about some of the active ingredients, some of the benefits and boosts, some of the concentrations, dosages, and delivery systems for flower, and then also some of the industrial uses and supply chains. I'll wrap up and I'll take questions at the end, because I believe we're going right into the next set of speakers, but I certainly look forward to exploring this topic further. This page here demonstrates the business services that Hemp Research Group is able to provide.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, T.Kay. And yes, we definitely look forward to the mixer that you're co-hosting this evening and continuing the conversations. All right, so next we'll hear from attorney Scheril Murray Powell. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I'm unmuted, and if T.Kay could unshare her screen.
Yes, please.
Oh.
Share your screen. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll show you.
1 second. All right, there we go.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome to my store.
Yeah, excellent. No, that's fantastic stuff. Thanks for setting the scene. My name is Scheril Murray Powell, Esquire. I'm a cannabis, agricultural, and dietary supplement attorney. My business partner, Billy Reynolds, is also on. He'll be sharing a little bit more with you about the international commodities side and other aspects. But I'll just start off by sharing some of the things that I'm involved in. So, you know, the hemp industry has come a long way, as T.Kay has indicated. Historically, we have, you know, even going back to, centuries ago, hemp was a part of our regular culture. All the ropes were made out of hemp. It was against the law to not even grow hemp at that time. So we've come a long way, but it hasn't been easy. So part of my work has to do with working on the legislation from state to state. So you may recall that there was a 2014 Farm Bill which authorized hemp for research. Okay, that's when we started to see the CBD industry thriving, some conversations about hemp for their over 50,000 uses of hemp. Since then, we've had the Farm Bill of 2018, which allowed the states to really have robust programs, and it removed hemp from the schedule list. This is a game changer for us, especially for the Black community, because we're always extra conscious about things that would lead to criminality and lead to incarcerations, because we tend to be the most targeted part of the population. So I do a lot of the legislative work. I do that on behalf of my clients a lot of the time. I try to balance with having nonprofits as my clients, as well as for-profit corporations. I would say between 60 and 70% of my work is unpaid work, and that's what I do for organizations. I'm one of the founding board members for the U.S. Hemp Building Association. I am no longer on their board, but I am still holding my position of Director of Government Relations. And that organization is focused on hemp for construction materials. They actually had a summit today that I dipped in between this summit and that summit, but I'm sure the replays will be available. You're in the right place at the right time. So I also I started out as the general counsel for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I was the executive director for the Black Farmers and Agriculturalists of Florida, and previously, and I was also the former director of federal affairs for the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So really varied as far as my experience in the space. But I know on this in this session, we have people from various backgrounds with regards to your experience with the hemp plant. So the first thing I want to start off is, let's make sure we understand the distinction between hemp and marijuana. So even though I said that hemp is unscheduled, it doesn't mean that you have free access to hemp in any form. You have to make sure that you understand that there's a legal distinction that starts at the federal level between what's lawful, what's not, what's hemp, what's marijuana. Now we can be really clear about the fact that they're the same plant. They are the same plant. It is a legal distinction that was arbitrarily chosen based on a botanist's theory that 0.3% is the threshold for intoxication. So the federal government has taken that and run with it, and therefore we have our standard. So in determining what's hemp and what's marijuana, it turns on two main things. One is the sourcing. Did you source from a lawful program? Meaning, is it from a tribe, or is it from a state where they have been authorized by their state program? Sourcing really matters. It's not just the THC percentage, but of course the second part of that is having the less than 0.3% THC percentage. So if you're sourcing hemp for any purpose, if you're touching hemp for any purpose, you need to make sure that whoever's supplying it to you can supply you with the chain of custody and understanding as far as the licenses that have been issued. So we like to monitor hemp from soil to oil, or soil to final finished product. So the farm where the hemp came from, is it a part of that state's legal program? That's important in determining legality. If it's a processed good, was it processed in an authorized site, a site that was authorized by their state and therefore by the USDA? That's really important information. So it's not, I always try to get into a little bit of the granular details so you understand that it's not hemp is lawful, marijuana isn't. It's not, hemp is legal in all 50 states. That's how people get in trouble. And as we know, I didn't know is not always a legitimate excuse or reason to get out of criminality. Now let's talk about the legal in all 50 states statement. When the USDA, when the federal government, when Congress authorized the USDA in the Federal Farm Bill of 2018 to regulate this program, and they also authorized FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to regulate this product in foods. So those are the two governing bodies with regards to hemp. Now, the USDA in their interim final rules, they wrote in the DEA, which had not been given a role previously with the Federal Farm Bill of 2018. We are still reviewing those rules. Those are the USDA interim final rules that they had reopened their comment period for recently. As a result of the USDA inserting the DEA, then the DEA came up with their own interim final rules. Those of us who've been advocates for a long time don't think they have the authority to do so because they are treating as controlled something that the Federal Farm Bill has said is unscheduled and not controlled as long as it's sourced from legally derived. So I wanted to set the scene as far as the legality aspects of it, but I don't want to alarm you. I'm also the Vice President of Business Development for Cannabisiac. You can go on www.cannabisiac.com and become a part of our network, and we're always doing educational information about the marijuana side as well as the hemp side. We do a Book of the Month club so that people are educated about cannabis, and we also do a Cannabisiac University event, and all are free right now. So I encourage you to do so. Beyond that, I am a hemp farmer. Billy and I manage 3 farms in the United States. One is located in the state of Maryland, and we have a farmer that we partner with there. The other one is located in South Carolina, and we have a farmer we partner with there. And then the final farm is in Florida, and we have a set of farmers that we partner with there. There are a lot of ways to get into the hemp industry. You do not necessarily have to touch plant or be a grower. I know when we talk about sustainability, we want to make sure that we can cover all parts of the progress. But as T.Kay alluded to, trust is a very important part of being in this business. And if you find partners who you can trust, you can set up a vertically integrated enterprise where you're not owning every part of it. And that's what we do as we empower our farmers and who work with us. And then Billy, as the commodities experts, figures out where we will sell the end product to. When you're getting into the area of hemp farming, you have to know what you're growing for and who you want to sell to. We saw the catastrophe of the 2019 growing season where farmers were left with their crops and no one to sell it to. This situation is extra devastating to the Black farmer. So I encourage you to make sure you do your research, develop relationships over time based in trust, and vet people that you want to work with so that you can know what you're doing with your product at the end of the day. So when you look at selling your product and having your product on hand, there are various things that you can use the product for. So if you want to grow for fiber, you have to make sure you're purchasing seeds for fiber hemp. If you want to grow for extracts and oil, you have to source the right seed. And with that seed, be sure that it's not going to run hot. It's not going to have higher than the legal amounts of THC. That's a whole trust paradigm, because when you're getting seeds, the seeds there's nothing written on the seeds like this will not go over 0.3%. This will actually grow and become a fiber plant. This will actually grow and become a CBD plant. This will actually grow and become a high CBG plant. That's why research is important. Partnering with the right people is important, and make sure they're people that you vetted and feel that you can trust. At this point, I'm going to hand over the discussion to my business partner, Billy Reynolds, who is also an owner of cannabisiac.com, as well as our consulting firm, Green Sustainable Strong.
All right, guys. Thank you for that, Scheril. And you touched, both yourself and T.Kay touched on some points that, I want to run away with. But my involvement with the plant, as we say, has many aspects. I am Rastafari. So first of all, ganja plant to me is the healing of the nations. It's something that we hold and revere as a sacrament. But this conversation is more about the sustainability and the supply chain of the business of the plant. And both T.Kay and Scheril talked about some things that you have to make those clear distinctions on, which are what is considered marijuana, or ganja as we like to call it, and what is considered hemp, because both, as much as they are able to be sold in legal marketplaces, both play by different rules. And so since we're dealing with hemp, we have to separate out the marijuana side, and that is distinguished, again, as Scheril pointed out, by the THC content which is in that plant. So when actually, even Scheril and I met, there was always a conversation about this hemp, getting a lot of people involved in hemp farming and, coming to the islands and trying to get more people in hemp farming because there were so many uses for hemp. that in itself will be another conversation, because there's the issue again that there is a viable marijuana market, um, which has been very difficult for individuals to get into in the US. In the islands, the rules are now becoming more defined, where legality, there's decriminalization, and there's a process of people being able to get involved in the industry, from growing to processing to selling, through a process that the government has set with licenses and all those things. There's more barriers to entry, um, probably in the US, um, than there are in the Caribbean. But the factors of cost are also a very big barrier to entry, for especially Black and brown people. Just because whether or not we want to face it, is that the marijuana industry was funded, you know, directly by the smugglers who were making money off of an illegal product, and they had their supply chain set up. They themselves funded small growers in the Caribbean and other places. They facilitated the transport back to the US and other places. So there was a whole network around the legal side. So now that we come into legality, that legality is now defined again by a THC content. So the good thing is that with the advent of, I guess, the definition between marijuana and hemp, there is an avenue and a space for people to get into something which before we were persecuted or we were locked up for. You know, that's another aspect that we need to recognize, that the Black and brown people were the ones who were locked up for most of the supply chain um, of this product. And at the end of the day, the ones at the top never really went to jail for it. But let us talk about now within the league, within the two spaces. So if it is that you're within the legal marijuana space, and you are able to get a license and you are able to um, sell product, again, it comes from, where do you come in as a cultivator, as a dispensary, you know, or are you processing the same materials that are there? The rules that come across to hemp um, are different, because there's a market that all of us can get into, which has nothing to do with licensing in the same way. It's not touching anything that the governments consider illegal, which is hemp. I have been trading in hemp products for many years through my company, International Commodities. We've been selling isolates. Um, my involvement again in the plant from that aspect came from out of waste management. One of the companies I own is a garbage company, and for many years we've been looking at waste to energy, and um, hemp fiber and other fibers were considered biomass. So now we come to the time where we can actually, there's trade in biomass, because now biomass is used for hempcrete. There are other industries that use, like even the oil industry that used to use kenaf, where we can now supply things like hemp fiber as absorbents. Hemp has a lot of uses. So we in the Black community, I think, need to, because the trade is where I would like to come into. I mean, I trade hemp. I am a farmer of hemp. I think I am involved in the supply chain in very many aspects. And so from at the end part is, people like to know how they're going to make some money. So the farmers, one of the things that they've had to have a very big consideration of is seeds and source of seeds, source of that genetic material. So, you know, as T.K. showed in her slides, that there's a gap with information, because when a lot of the prohibition came and a lot of stuff went, there are a lot of things that were lost. People talk about CBD. CBD is special genetics, to grow plants with high CBD content and low THC content, you know, is special genetics. So again, who had these seeds and where are these seeds coming from? And that's something that is very important for growers to think, because the industrial hemp that everybody was growing, or in Canada and other places, for seed purposes and for fiber purposes, are different than some of these high CBD varieties. And so I mean, a topic that we can go into very deeply. But one of the things that we need to consider, that what it is, that the genetic material that we got to make CBD. So what is it that you're going to grow for? Are you growing for a CBD market? Are you growing for a fiber market? Are you going to be growing for seeds? The buzzword these days has been, CBD. Everybody's talking about CBD oils. But again, let's look at that in a real way. So again, the depending on what part of the CBD market that you want to get into, from the grower, you need to consider those seeds. How hot they can become is determined by grow conditions. A lot of it is genetics. Some of it is very much timing of harvest. And yet there's also remediation of that can happen on the processing side to remove the THC. So that is something, genetics from a grower perspective. Who are you going to sell to? Is the next thing. So that is where has been the challenge, especially in 2019. A lot of people lost a lot of money from growers that went hot and they weren't able to sell them. Some processors actually went out of business before actually people were able to give them even product. There were a lot of things that happened last year that I think was just the growing pains of a renewed industry, because it was always there before in different ways. So from the processor side, again, processors or people who are getting involved have to consider what product they're getting. A lot of processors require testing, which is very extensive. We have to have a full panel test, which not only covers what are the THC and cannabinoid contents, but what are the heavy metals, pesticides, other things that could be possible in the plant. From a processor perspective, because most of them are going to be using it for extracts. So those things are very important for them. Now, for international sales, we think about one of the big things is guys in the US say, okay, let's export. But right now, the big problem, and there's a big price difference too, with US growers as opposed to what's happening in other places, is that there's a requirement. There are standards that are being set worldwide. Different countries have different standards that are required. Europe has their own standard. And a lot of European processors require that growers grow to a EU GMP standard or a EU GAP standard. So there has to be agricultural practices that are within a certain, that are done in a certain way. And even the extraction of those oils, there has to be, the facilities have to be EU GAP certified or GMP certified. And there's a big difference in price. I mean, we can talk about $500 a kilo, or as opposed to $4,000. There's a difference in price just because of how the whole process is. So again, when we talk about that whole supply chain, and again, how are your markets? What markets are you looking at?
The commodity, right? The global right. Economy.
Because everybody talks about export.
Yep.
Yeah, and even our products that we manufacture, again, the THC content or the what is in it again, is different for some markets. There, for CBD, there is a push for zero THC, but yet a lot of people ask for full spectrum oils. So, if you have a full spectrum oil, does that have a percentage of THC in it? And then you have other people in, is that going to be allowed into that particular jurisdiction? Even within the US, I think there are varied rules that even apply to CBD in different states. As much as, we say, there have been people that I know that have had to face court cases about just selling CBD. As the rules change, Scheril can speak to that. A lot of things will happen. But there's,
Yeah,
and
I was just going to say that's a great segue, because I want to touch upon more of the legal aspects. And I know, so Billy's done a great job of setting out the international aspect of it, on some of the considerations when you are trying to broker these deals and find your purchaser. You need to make sure that you have your certificates of analysis, you understand what you're growing and for whom, and whether you're trying to reach a medical standard or GMP standard, and there or ISO standards. So I know there's another speaker, I think.
Let's hear from Jehuti, and I think that question is going to come up about the commodities, the situation in different countries, and some more policy related things. So thank you, Mr. Reynolds and Scheril. Let's tune
No
in.
problem. And we'll be around to answer questions, because I know Billy has a few more points on that he was going to share as well.
And Mr. Reynolds will be on another panel for water. So we look forward to hearing from you more, but please do stay with us and we will chat. People are definitely going to want to talk more about this, and even at the mixer breakout on later. Let's turn it over to Jehuti. Go ahead and share your screen, please.
Okay.
And the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Jehuti Willis. I have a background in mechanical engineering and years of experience working in operations management, working to execute short-term improvements with long-term impacts of the supply chain. I am also the founder of the People's Power Company, a supply chain consulting business. We'll get into the details of what that looks like, but first, thoughts on power. We believe that the people's power is in renewable energy systems, a key feature of sustainable infrastructure. There's also power in collaboration. We know significant impact comes from aligning people's passions and their skills. And there is power in productivity in terms of developing functional spaces and innovative cultures around collective needs. So when it comes down to it, power is the ease of producing our own solutions. I believe the quote is power is the ability to turn your dreams into reality, the ability to manifest. We seek to enhance the people's power by supporting Black supply chains through data insight, strategic operations planning, and process improvement. Some of the specific strategies we use are listed, and I can go more in depth in Q&A or offline if you're interested. In short, we turn doing into data and that info into insight. We turn challenges into strategy and strategy into actionable plans. And we shift process into continuous improvement with the focus on manufacturing and production-based businesses. However, these can also be applied to service-based businesses as well. I will explain how this all ties together after a short explanation and significance of supply chains. My running definition of a supply chain is all of the people, processes, materials, and assets needed to manifest an idea. People would include all of the departments in a company that support the development, implementation of a product or service, and would also include any independent contractors, suppliers, etc. Materials are self-explanatory. Processes would be all of the technical as well as business processes that support the development and the implementation of the product or service. And assets would include all of the technology, machines, software, etc. A supply chain can be broken down into some major elements, and we'll use the example of agriculture to illustrate. It all begins with the producer, sometimes referred to as a supplier, and it's the person who harvests the raw resource. In this example, let's say it's a hemp farmer. The hemp plant is transported to a processing plant where they create value-add products such as CBD butter, lotion, drinks, tinctures, vape cartridges, etc. Other examples of agricultural processors would also include chefs, those who make herbal drinks, teas, snacks, and other consumer products. These processors are most likely pulling from several different producers to get the variety, price, and quantity they need to meet demand. These products are then transported again to wholesalers or retailers at digital and or physical locations to be purchased by a consumer. The buyer can be a business, an individual, or even a group of individuals, for example, families or buying collectives. Of course, there are numerous variations of the supply chain model, including drop shipping from manufacturers and such. As you see, a good supply chain solves a need of the buyer, and the upstream elements align to provide a quality product at a reasonable price point. A successful supply chain should also manage a proper flow of materials and product at a rate that meets the demand within the agreed upon lead time. So enough of the deep dive. Let's put it back into context. We, as a nation of people, we as a nation of people, of diasporic Africans with communities around the world, require certain goods and services to effectively function. Nana John Henrik Clarke said that every nation requires 6 things: the ability to feed, clothe, house, educate, heal, and defend itself. I would also break out a few additional features to address economy, innovation, arts and media, and counsel. All of these require a robust supply chain to meet the needs of the nation. You could probably identify products or services that you use regularly in all of these areas. The question is, who owns, manages, directs, and builds these supply chains that you support? Your first thought may be to think of the Black-owned health store or t-shirt brand that you patronize and think that that solves the issue. Please note, that is a good step, but that only represents 2/5 of the solution, if that. The purchase you make is at the retail level, but what about the distributors, the processors, and the producers? Are those Black-owned? The significance of an all-Black supply chain lies in a few points that I will highlight, starting with economy. Let's continue to use hemp as an example. As you may know, those with the valuable raw resources to sell, the producers, seldom are the profit takers in the supply chain. Using some rough data from several resources to illustrate the point, we see that a hemp farmer may be able to sell one 1-pound hemp plant with about $20 of profit. Their margin may be around 50%, definitely higher than your average agricultural product. With that same one plant, the processor may be able to extract about 73 tinctures worth of refined CBD oil. Their profit may be closer to about $5.3 thousand per plant with a margin of about 96%. When it gets to retail, we're looking at $1.8 thousand in profit from selling to customers with about a 25% margin. The split in revenue and margin trends change from industry to industry, but what remains the same is the financial advantage that most processors have over producers. Producers can leverage political influence or limited access to valuable resources to gain higher profits. However, generally, processors, customer-facing businesses, and those who control multiple aspects of the supply chain will garner more leverage, profit, and better terms. This does not mean that we should forego a role in production, nor that it's okay to just play a role in retail. The point that I want to highlight is the strategic position of value-add processors and the limited presence of Black processors in many industries, present company excluded. Even more so, the strategic position of corporations that are vertically integrated and control the majority, if not the entire supply chain. They're able to significantly reduce operational costs because they don't have to pay premium margins to engage in every level of the supply chain. There's actually a recently established Black-owned hemp business called Verde Leaf that owns the seed to the finished product. They have a tincture that sells for 25% lower than similar products at other companies. Imagine the operational savings they are able to take advantage of if they can pass forward such a savings to the customer. My last subpoint regarding the economy of supply chain is the need for innovation for economic benefit. During my last trip to Ghana, I visited Bunri, the Kente village. There they create their own dyed thread, which they process into Kente cloth. The Kente is used by tailors to produce customized outfits. Although one company does not own the entire process, we can say the Ghanaian people, as a nation, with this vertically integrated Kente process. What I saw there in Ghanaian shops and what we saw when dashikis trended again several years back, was not the same Kente. We saw Dutch wax cloth or Chinese printed textiles and dashikis made in Thailand, made available to the world. The issue, I believe, is the rate of innovation. Ghanaian Kente is still made as an artisan product using traditional looms and production processes. Ghana's textile industry is not devoid of innovation as seen by Ghana Textiles Print. However, the innovation of foreign textile makers to imitate African cloth using current technology and mass production processes have allowed the operational costs to beat that of the vertically integrated Ghanaian process. The takeaway is that we need an innovative, robust, all-Black supply chain that meets the ever-changing needs of the diaspora and confronts the challenges of the competitive landscape. The second major benefit of an all-Black supply chain is self-sufficiency. Who do we go to solve our solution? Who feeds us? Who defends us? Who clothes us? If it's not us, then it's they. And if they decide for whatever reason that our problems shouldn't be solved, that we shouldn't eat live, nutritious food, that we are a threat and don't deserve defense, that we don't need clothes that represent our culture, then they can remove our access. For everything that we need as a community, as a people, we must depend on ourselves and go internally for our collaborative solutions. That is a vertically integrated supply chain. If others outside of our communities have solutions for us, we can engage from a stable foundation as needed. But we should not be dependent upon anyone else than ourselves. Getting to this state is a process, but the advantage of having a diaspora is already having people involved in every level of government, in every industry, in many cultures and religions with all the skills, resources, and perspectives needed to gain this autonomy. Wielders of good supply chains take the landscape before them and actively source the most effective components. So we must pull and train the best Black producers, the best Black distributors, the best Black wholesalers and retailers, and the most informed and cooperative Black consumers, because we are self-sufficient. The third major benefit of a Black supply chain is resiliency. We've seen state and national infrastructure and supply chains break down in the face of natural and man-made disasters alike. We must not be victims of a system that we do not control. I believe that we need self-sufficient units around the world interconnected to each other, each encompassing, for example, 20 square miles of Black communities that deliver local infrastructure and supply chain solutions. That looks like a supply chain unit that stretches across West End, Beecher Hills, Pittsburgh, Sweet Auburn, Atlanta University Center, for those familiar with Atlanta, that pulls food from the local Black farmers like Truly Living Well, makes them available in local Black restaurants like Tassili's, and fresh alkaline deliveries from Moonjug Water, and defense training and presence from the Huey P. Newton Gun Club, and local holistic health practitioners that heal these Black communities with products made by local processors, and schools and educational programs like the Insoma School to teach the next generation about STEAM and how to improve the impact and service of the supply chain. I could go on, but the point is resiliency. So now we've come full circle. How does data insight, strategic operations planning, and process improvement help support the creation of financially sound, self-sufficient, and resilient Black supply chains? Excuse me. The importance of data has been on the rise. Big companies are investing into big data, the collection, analysis, and utilization of millions of data points, creating feedback loops that inform how they innovate. Many small Black businesses haven't invested enough into gaining clear sight to their data when it comes to making the strategic and effective decisions in regards to price points, supplier selection, customer segmentation, profit increase, social impact, customer service, and general opportunities for improvement, among others. It requires entrepreneurs' intuitive understanding of their business and industry, along with clear data to make the right decision. The People's Power Company uses data to highlight your business's positive trends and to identify key challenges. Data is also used to inform strategic planning to focus on the major levers that will bring the most impact. You measure and monitor lead and lag metrics to pace your progress and help determine the path forward. Data provides the baseline for target process improvements and paints the picture for employees, investors, and customers to better understand your story and how they fit within it. Lastly, we are using data to connect databases of Black businesses across the supply chain and across industries to each other to develop productive connections, convert to an all-Black supply chain, and very simply to make win-win deals when it comes to aligning Black businesses' needs with other Black businesses' skills. So how to get involved? We've been developing a database of Black-owned businesses on our website below, Black Pages Directory. Please check it out, use it, and let us know of a business that we should add. If you have or know a Black-owned business within the sustainable industries, please tap into the Black Sustainability Network. The People's Power Company will be partnering with them to make productive and impactful connections. Our goal is to identify opportunities that will benefit the development of all Black supply chains by supporting individual business operations and collaborations of these productive businesses, because we know that the people do have power. Thank you.